Hello, I'm Michael Marsh. Welcome to the program dedicated to reestablishing constitutional government, first in Oregon and then in the United States. And both the Oregon and the United States constitutions are still on the books. And our elected officials, and even some non-elected officials, they still take the oath to uphold the Constitution. A few actually do, but not very many. This is the election season, and I will have a lot of different candidates on, and that way people can decide whether or not to vote for the person, because information is key. And today my guest is Daniel Zane Crowe.
Yes, sir.
Who is the Republican candidate for Attorney General. So, Daniel, why are you running for Attorney General?
Well, Michael, it's pretty simple. I was a soldier I grew up in Mount Angel, and then I went to West Point and then served as a soldier and as a judge advocate for 25 years in the Army. And I came back to Oregon in 2011 and saw, much to my chagrin, when I started working with veterans who struggle with homelessness and addiction and mental illness out of the Metro Public Defender's Office up in Portland, but covering the whole state. I saw a rule of law that wasn't functioning properly, and I saw a path that Oregon was on that I've seen in other countries, and that path leads to a breakdown in the rule of law and in law and order. And I believe that we have a right to expect something more than expediency and the rule of the mighty over the rule of law. And I think it's serious. And the saddest thing of all is in those countries in which I've worked, in which the rule of law is either broken down or isn't functioning properly, the people who suffer the most are always the people at the bottom. And that's the tragedy of what's happening in Oregon right now, is that people at the bottom are the ones who are suffering. People who are wealthy and successful, they're always going to end up doing okay in the end. The people who suffer first and suffer most are the people at the bottom. And unfortunately, in my opinion, neither of our political parties at the national level are doing enough to address the critical problems that are facing our people. And one of the most critical problems that we need to address here in Oregon is the lack of justice. And that really should be what the Attorney General of Oregon is doing. So to put it in a brief, little teacup, I'm running for Attorney General in Oregon because I believe that the rule of law is something that's sacred, that needs to be protected, and because I think that Oregon deserves better.
Now, the Oregon Attorney General's office, it has several jobs. Mm-hmm. Two of the more interesting jobs are, one, it's the job of the Attorney General to investigate government corruption. It is also the Attorney General's job to protect corrupt state officials. So which one are you going to actually do?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll answer that in two parts. First of all, Ellen Rosenblum, the incumbent Attorney General of Oregon, doesn't agree with you. That she believes that the Attorney General doesn't have the power to investigate corrupt public officials. And remember that she told us directly that I don't have authority to investigate Governor Kitzhaber, right? That was inaccurate. ORS 180.240 gives the Attorney General of Oregon the power of every district attorney in every county in Oregon. So what I say out on the hustings is that the Attorney General is responsible for making sure that people in Oregon follow the law, including people who work in government. And I absolutely agree that the Attorney General is the government official who is responsible for being a voice for the people and for ensuring that government officials aren't stealing money and aren't being corrupt. Ellen Rosenblum disagrees with you. She believes that the Attorney General should turn a blind eye towards corruption.
Well, that's because she's chosen which one of those two jobs to actually do.
Well, and with respect, now, let me address directly your second assertion, and that is that the Attorney General is responsible for protecting corrupt government officials. I couldn't disagree with you more. I served as a judge advocate for the last 2/3 of my career. And a large chunk of that, I was working at U.S. European Command, which manages, at the time when I came there, it managed all of the U.S. military's operations in all of Europe, including Russia, and in all of Africa. So there were 89 countries in our area of responsibility. And as a judge advocate, it was my job to advise commanders and to give them nonpartisan, impartial, non-political legal service. That was my job. And one of the things that I always talked to my commanders about before I would give them advice, these general officers and flag officers in the Navy, one of the things you have to make them understand is, I am not your personal attorney. Right? My job is to represent your office. My job is to assist you. Now, the curious thing in Oregon is that all lawyers in Oregon government report to the Attorney General. So first of all, we know that unless the Democratic Party controls the office of the Attorney General, if they control the office of the Attorney General, their ability to rule undemocratically is unimpeded.
Yeah.
Right? Because it provides the fig leaf, the legal opinions that Ellen Rosenblum issues are fig leaves that allow corrupt government officials to act undemocratically. And it's unfortunate, and it shouldn't be a partisan office one way or the other. So the Attorney General of Oregon is responsible for providing legal services to all departments of Oregon government. Right? That doesn't mean that the Attorney General is responsible for suborning any kind of illegal behavior, tolerating it. And quite the contrary, I think that the responsibility to investigate and, when necessary, prosecute public corruption, and the responsibility to provide legal services to every department in Oregon government are two pieces of service that are actually quite well integrated if our lawyers are being properly led. Because when we give proper legal advice, one of the things, and I've said this to general officers before, and sometimes they didn't want to hear it, but this is what the job of a lawyer is to say this is the way the law is, whether you like it or not. And the opportunity that I had when I was advising these generals is to say, sir or ma'am, no, you can't do this. It's illegal. It's my job to tell you what's legal or not. Now, you're the boss, you're the general, or you're the Secretary of State, or you're the governor. You can make your decision, but you should rest assured that I have given you my advice, and that's straight down the middle, without fear or favor, and that if you choose to disregard my advice, then if somebody comes around and asks, I'm not going to jail for you, and I'm not going to jail for anyone else. And so, my job is to provide honest legal advice, call balls and strikes the way that they are. That's not what we're getting from our current Attorney General, and it breaks my heart, because by refusing to do her duty, she has created an environment within Oregon government of a lack of accountability. And it is the Attorney General is supposed to be, that's the office that's supposed to be the voice for Oregon people. And we don't have a voice right now, and I think it's absolutely tragic, because a lot of malfeasance and corruption won't happen if there is some deterrent. And the best deterrent, the best disinfectant, is sunshine. So if you shine a light on things that are going on and let the people know what's going on, well, then that keeps honest people honest, and it keeps public officials from breaking the law. And that's why we need a new Attorney General. We need an Attorney General who isn't a partisan hack. We need an Attorney General whose career background is delivering impartial, nonpartisan, non-political legal services for the benefit of our country, was my background, or for the benefit of Oregon, which is where my heart has always been.
Now, another job of the Attorney General is to write up a ballot title for initiatives, and someone who cares about the grassroots movements and initiatives. I've noticed that a lot of times the Attorney General's ballot title has nothing to do with, in fact, it's the opposite of what the initiative itself would try to do.
It's absolutely shameful.
How would you do that
Well,
job? Part of your job.
When somebody's sticking a thumb on the scales of justice, then you can't get an accurate measurement. And the problem that we have right now is, I don't want to fix this by putting a thumb on the other scale. That's not the way to do it. You take a thumb off the scale, What I'll explain, we were talking earlier about the Oregon Plan and William Simon Uren, the guy from Clackamas County who invented the Oregon Plan and introduced it into our law. So, what people around the country might not know, or people around the state might not know, is that the Oregon Plan was invented here in Oregon. It's the recall, the initiative, the referendum, and the recall, and that was designed to balance the power of established special interests. It was customized, and it spread from Oregon, like a lot of great ideas, through the rest of the country. And I don't know how many states have the Oregon Plan now, but it's in the high double digits. When this plan to work, right, officials in government need to be honest, and they need to be providing honest services. The Secretary of State is responsible for administering the election system, as you know. The Attorney General assists the Secretary of State in this by following Oregon law to give a nonpartisan, impartial ballot title, a result of no yes vote, 25 words. So the ballot title is 15 words. The result of yes vote is 25 words. The result of no vote is 25 words. And the summary is, I think, 125 words. So let me give you a specific example. Since I came back to Oregon, as I shared with you, I've been spending the last 5 years building a system of systems to care for veterans throughout Oregon who struggle, right? And I think that's important work, and I've loved every day of it. Part of that was that we were involved in passing House Joint Resolution 202. And in this bitterly divided legislature, we were able to push that through 58-0. And I think that was a terribly amazing accomplishment. That's to the credit of a lot of great legislators like Representative Evans, Representative Lively, Representative Parrish, Senator Brian Boquist. I mean, these are people who've worked on this for years and years and years, and we were just a small part of this overall fight. We got it passed, right? And what that resolution said is we're going to send to the people to vote this fall that we're going to take 1.5% of net lottery proceeds and we're going to fund a Veteran Services Fund so that right now we can provide better support to our veterans because we have $5 billion per year in unclaimed veterans benefits here in Oregon. And for every dollar we spend on veteran service officers, we get $77 more in veterans benefits. So it's one of those rare cases that I can go to my partners in the legislature and I can say, this is one of those rare instances in which the moral case and the fiscal case align. Great. We get it passed through the legislature, and it goes to the Secretary of State's office, and this Attorney General gives a result of yes vote, a result of no vote. And it was the most inaccurate, unlawful, inappropriate, deceptive, a thing that I've ever read in my entire life. As an elector under Oregon law, I have the right to dispute to the Secretary of State the proposed ballot titling from the Attorney General. And this I did. And I said, this is why, under Oregon law, why this isn't appropriate and why it's unlawful. Now, the dilemma that Attorney General Rosenblum was in was that if she doesn't incorporate my suggested changes, I have the right to appeal directly to the Oregon Supreme Court on an expedited basis. So what does she do? She backs down, and we end up getting a fair, impartial, nonpartisan ballot title with what is now Measure 96, which is the Veteran Services Fund bill. And it's critically important for everybody who's watching your show that whether you vote for me or not, we have a sacred obligation to take care of our veterans, and Measure 96 is something that has to pass, and it has to pass with overwhelming support in Oregon. The thing that disturbed me most through this process was that this shouldn't be a political football. This passed through the legislature 58-0, and yet Ellen Rosenblum's Oregon Department of Justice passed a completely unprincipled result where you can't tell what a yes vote means, what a no vote means, right? And we see this over and over again in the ballot titling process.
That's why I asked this question.
And so I was able to fight her to a standstill and to beat her off and get something that was fair with respect to Measure 96. But there are multiple other measures every season that don't get in front of it because this process has become completely politicized, and and what's happening is that it's taking away the voice of the Oregon people, not the voice of Republicans or not the voice of Constitutionalists or not the voice of Libertarians. It's taking away the voice or even the voice of Pacific Greens or progressives. It's taking away the voice voice of Oregon people who have a right to be involved in the process. And yet when you have dishonest ballot titling, you are undermining the entire principle of the Oregon plan to advance narrow partisan political interests. Ellen Rosenblum is completely in the pocket of special interests that rule this state with an iron fist. And your viewers, however bad they think it is, it's far worse. I mean, I've worked in third world countries in which government is less dishonest than some of the things I've seen come out of Oregon government. And none of us are surprised. I mean, we see it from the top, from Governor Kitzhaber all the way down to the bottom, that people aren't being held accountable. It's absolutely inconceivable to me that we have an attorney general who plays politics with things like caring for veterans. And yet she did it because her political masters told her, bury this thing. And so she gave a dishonest ballot title, but when push came to shove and I pushed back, she folded like a cheap piece of wet cardboard because her best interests are even more important than the interests of those special interests, right? So she's got the people of Oregon down here, the special interests here, and her own interest up here. And I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that a lawyer would be that unprincipled. And I hope that she finally agrees to debate us and that she finally gives us an opportunity. Heck, in this program, I'll meet her anywhere, anytime, so that she can explain to us why it's 18 months later and Governor Kitzhaber, we still don't have any answers. We don't even have any questions yet. I mean, there's so many opportunities, but with respect to ballot titling, let's circle back around to that. The system isn't going to work properly until we hold the politicians who are turning it into something it's not, until we hold them accountable, right? And the only way to hold them accountable is to vote them out of office. So when I am Attorney General, the short-term answer is that I'm going to just call these balls and strikes as I see them, and I'm going to give the people who are the proponents of the measure, right, the opportunity to write their own ballot summary, result of yes vote, result of no vote, and summary. And if they're honest about it, then that's easy. My job will be easy. I'll bless off on it. That's the short-term answer. The long-term answer is I need to work with our partners in the legislature to get the Attorney General out of the business of ballot titling. We should be having a randomly selected panel of, for instance, 3 judges who can make sure that these things are selected from throughout the state. Or there's a lot of different solutions. A lot of states use different solutions. A lot of states that have implemented the Oregon plan, the initiative, the recall, and the referendum have different solutions. Having a partisan political officer being responsible for it creates the risk that it's going to be misused. Now, under my leadership, it won't be, because I believe that my integrity is worth a little more than a payoff from a special interest. But at the very least, we need to do something about it.
Speaking about measures, okay, when the people vote, one of the jobs of the Attorney General is to defend that vote. You know, because there are special interests that don't like the way people of Oregon vote. And Ellen Rosenblum.
Yes.
Anyway, she does not always defend the people's vote. If you're the Attorney General, are you going to defend the people's vote?
The number one job of the Oregon Attorney General is to be the voice for the people of Oregon. You shouldn't be the voice of special interests. When the Oregon people pass a law and it's challenged in court, it is the responsibility of the Attorney General to vigorously defend the state of Oregon and the people of Oregon. Now, as a lawyer, I have been called upon before to defend clients who've done things that I didn't necessarily agree with. And sometimes I've defended clients, particularly at court-martial, who've been accused of doing terrible things. But the central principle of the practice of law is that a lawyer's advocacy for his or her client does not mean that the lawyer agrees with what the client has done. It's the attorney's duty to do their job. Right? Now, I think that you're talking about the gay marriage case.
That did come to mind.
And you know what? I'm not the kind of person who pussyfoots around things. And so I'm going to tell you, whether your viewers agree with it or not, marriage equality is the law of the land. And that's just the way things are. The Supreme Court has spoken. And to be completely honest with you, I understand. I don't agree that it should have been a federal issue. It should have been something that we in Oregon sorted out ourselves. I don't think, remember when we were younger, people always used to say, don't make a federal case out of this. Yeah. And yet in this day and age, everything seems to be going to the federal government. And unelected and unaccountable and unresponsive federal judges have inserted themselves into a process that should be a process of compromise between different interests. Right? Now, a lot of people in this state are very, very sensitive about gay marriage, both pro and against, because it really is an intensely personal thing. And my position as the Attorney General is not to get involved in controversial social issues. To sort that out is the legislature's job. My job is to give the legislature the opportunity to sort these things out, or to give the people the opportunity to sort these things out. So I'm glad that people who love each other in Oregon, regardless of their sexual orientation, have the opportunity to marry each other. It's
That's
the law.
Not the question that I asked.
Exactly. So, but I want to be very careful, because people see a Republican running for office and they assume that this Republican is focused on divisive social issues. The matter is settled. Going forward, right, the next time this issue comes up, we have to have an Attorney General who has principles. And the way that this litigation was handled was the one thing you can never do as an attorney. Because just to review how this case went down, this matter was going to be on the ballot for us to vote on that fall, right? And Attorney General Rosenblum, the state was sued in federal court. She then directed not that the case be settled, which is, if she felt that strongly about it, she could have settled it with a swipe of the pen. But she didn't. She allowed a case to go forward without two actual parties in interest. Okay? You cannot conspire with the other side to set up a fake case to go to federal court. It makes a mockery of our system. And she did this for one simple reason. It's not because she cares about gay people. Right? She doesn't give a hoot for gay people. She did this because this is the way she could extract maximum political advantage with minimum political exposure. Because she figured if things went wrong, people would blame Judge McShane, who is an alumni of the Metro Public Defender's Office, where I work today, right? And it is distressing to me when you have that level of venality and that level of corrupt thinking. But you see it time and time and time again. Sometimes you grit your teeth and you defend your client, even though you know your client's wrong, because the truth will out, and we will sort this out. And it's a tragedy that we didn't allow the Oregon people to do this. And let me tell you what the consequence of that is. The consequence of Ellen Rosenblum throwing a case, the one thing that a lawyer can never do, is that in the Oregon Constitution right now, in this Constitution right here, there still is a statement by the people of Oregon in the Constitution that says that gay marriage is something that the Oregon people are against. So by conspiring with Judge McShane in a show trial, Attorney General Rosenblum took away our ability to make it right.
Well, whether you believe it's right or wrong, how do we trust the Attorney General's office? How do we trust the whole court system?
Absolutely. But if you believe, so for everybody who believes that gay marriage should be the law of the land, right? She took away the ability of the people. And for those of us who believe that gay marriage shouldn't be the law of the land, well, you know what? One group thinks it should be, one group thinks it shouldn't be. This is why we have a political process. Why that needs to go up to the federal courts and get sorted out. This is a matter in which Oregonians are perfectly capable of deciding the way in which we organize ourselves and live with each other. And we may not like We may not get the instant gratification of getting what we want right now, but I believe that Oregon is tolerance, always has been tolerance, and always will be tolerance. And that's the Oregon that I grew up. I grew up in Tom McCall's Oregon. And so that's the thing. I mean, I want to be very careful because I don't want any commercials out there saying, Daniel Crowe hates people or whatever. I've got no hate in my heart for anybody other than people who prostitute the law in order to achieve their own personal interests. That's not the way the system's supposed to work.
And, how do you trust a court system that does this, where it was a show trial and everybody knew? There was no doubt in anybody, whichever side you're on, you knew that was a fake trial. And you knew the game was rigged.
Yeah.
So, and this is what they're doing in public. What are they doing behind closed doors that nobody's watching?
Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you where I come from with respect to this. Is when I became a district attorney, I sat down with my prosecutors, and the very first time I ever talked to them, I sat them all down and I said, "You are not the anti-defense counsel. You don't put a thumb on the scale of justice under any circumstances because the United States of America is better than that." Oregon is better than that. We don't need to cheat to get justice. And quite the contrary, my experience is every time somebody bends the rules to achieve a result, right, the ends don't justify the means. And every time somebody does that, you end up with terrible and unintended consequences. And the tragedy is that the rule of law has been the best ally of the LGBTQ community in this country ever. And the idea that you would trifle with that in order to get an instant gratification is short-sighted and sad. And I understand that they were frustrated, and I understand they wanted it to happen yesterday. But that's not the way meaningful, sustainable social change happens. And I believe so strongly in the power of the law to deliver social change, but only if it's done with integrity. And I'm sorry, and I don't mean to be harsh, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, and I'm not at all. But I just see the things that this Attorney General, this incumbent Attorney General has done, and I don't believe that she's approached this job with the integrity which the people of Oregon deserve.
Now, one last issue. When the Attorney General was given the job of investigating Oracle, first thing she did was she hired new attorneys. Now, Oregon Attorney General's office, that's the largest law firm in the state. Why does she need to be hiring new attorneys? And would you be hiring new attorneys, or would you figure out how to do it yourself?
Well, you get the mission accomplished with the resources you're given, and if you can't, you better have a darn good reason. So let's review the bidding. June 29th of 2012, Governor Kitzhaber picks Ellen Rosenblum out of obscurity on the Oregon Court of Appeals and names her 4 months before the election to be the Attorney General of Oregon. Right? Couldn't wait. Had to put his hand-picked person in there. Now we know now that Governor Kitzhaber had some ethical problems even back then. Yeah. Right? So it's no surprise that he picked somebody who he thought he could rely on to turn a blind eye towards his malfeasance. Yeah. Okay, that's what happens when you have one-party rule, right? So he picked a reliable political ally in order to carry water for him. Okay, so going forward now, right, 2 years later, this Oracle thing starts falling apart, as it was always going to fall apart. Yeah. Remember that Ellen Rosenblum, and the Attorney General, is responsible for reviewing every contract and agreement that Oregon is into. So Cover Oregon, that's her baby, because she didn't review the contract to make sure to read the fine print, which is what we have lawyers for. So now it's falling apart, and she's implicated, the governor's implicated. Right? It's all falling apart. Right? And it harkens back to your first question about, well, you're responsible for assisting members of Oregon government, but you're also responsible for prosecuting public corruption. Well, you need somebody who's a leader, who has integrity, who's going to say, no, you're not going to do this, Mr. Governor. This is not only a bad idea, but it's illegal. So this thing blows up and falls apart. So now, having blown $300 million of your money, she then turns around and says, oh, Oracle's bad. So what does she do? She shops that case up to the U.S. Department of Justice. Because of course, I would do that as well. I mean, we have a federal government for some reasons, and one of them is that they have a lot of resources. So if a state is getting cheated, and if it's federal Affordable Care Act money anyway, well, the Fed should take this case on and go sue Oracle. And yet, what does the U.S. Department of Justice say? No thanks. There's nothing here that we could use as a basis for a lawsuit. So then, and only then, when the U.S. Department of Justice passes, does Ellen Rosenblum come back and say, okay, we're going to have to handle this ourselves. I have talked to attorneys, both current and former attorneys in the Oregon Department of Justice, who are furious, I mean professional attorneys, who are furious at the concept that Ellen Rosenblum farmed this case out. We had the capability to litigate this case, but somehow she convinces the legislature to spend money to a politically connected law firm up in Portland. Surprise, surprise. She promises us that it's only going to cost $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Next thing you know, we've spent $12.5 million at the end of this short session. Now, we just heard that we're up to $27 million, which, you believe you me, means we're going to end up spending $40. And that's just for us. Now,
okay, we need to wrap this up because we're out of time, so make it quick.
Okay, look, I don't know everything about this case. And if there is the slightest evidence that Oracle has done wrong, then I'm going to make them pay, right? But I am deeply concerned, given the lack of integrity of the way that the Attorney General's approached every other one of her duties. Why should we give her the benefit of the doubt that this is anything other than a further waste of your tax dollars to cover Democrat backsides, which is what I think this litigation is.
Probably.
And if it is, then it's inexcusable because she's using our money to cover her own political backside. And that's disturbing. And so my concern is that we need to get past this, and we need to have justice, but we need to also make sure that this isn't some politically motivated witch hunt. And that's what I suspect it is, and that's what everything that she's done up to this point shows us that it is. So I think this is a case which I won't prejudge. You know, we're in it now. And if we're in it and there's a reasonable possibility of us winning, then I'm going to drive it home and I'm going to win. But we need to at least, if I get into office and I discover that there isn't anything there, well, then we have a moral obligation to then try to settle the case at the least expense to Oregon. And we see this Punch and Judy show where the governor is saying, the governor makes these representations that we're going to settle, and the attorney general says, no, we're not going to settle. I mean, these people they're political allies, and they can't give them the same sheet of music. And my job is to manage the litigation, which means representing and defending the state of Oregon against any encroachments by private companies. And the last thing I'll share with you, Michael, is that I was the lawyer at the Office of Military Cooperation in Cairo, Egypt, and my job there was to administer the $1.7 billion that we give to the Egyptians every year pursuant to the Camp David peace accords. So I had to deal with General Dynamics and Raytheon and the Egyptian government, and I made sure that they never took advantage of the U.S. taxpayers. And I think I can deliver, and I will deliver, that exact same level of world-class legal service to the people of Oregon. I thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for coming up.
And hopefully we're going to be able to get all the Constitutional Party members out to vote and voting for a change.
We need a change. Thank you for coming on and sharing your views.
Thank you so much, Michael. And hopefully, please invite Ellen to come because I'd love to hear her side of the story. I doubt that she's ever going to debate me, and I doubt that she's ever going to come here because she doesn't like answering questions.
No. Yeah. She knows who I am.
Well, you're doing great work, and thank you so much for having me. I want to do a special, like 3-hour long special, because you could.